And welcome back to the Financially Simple Experience. I'd say that and I chuckle, literally off the cuff here. I had somebody reach out to me the other day and they said, "Hey, Justin, why do you call it the Financially Simple Experience?" I haven't talked about this in some time, but I've been doing now the podcast for 400 some odd episodes. And in the early days, it was the Financially Simple Show, etc. But the reality is I don't believe a podcast should just be entertainment. I don't believe it should just be me or anybody else talking into a microphone. If we can take the knowledge that so many have shared, that I try to have our editors and our producers take the information from so many people, condense it down to where we can apply it to us as business owners. If we can take this knowledge, then we can experience change. We can experience growth, value increasing, peace. We can experience so many things through knowledge sharing. I love it whenever y'all reach out to me through LinkedIn. That's probably the most popular place that listeners reach out. They say, "Hey, Justin, I heard you on this podcast mention this. Man, that helped me and impacted me in this way." We even read on the reviews. People leave reviews on the show, and it's like, man, they experienced something. They learned something. They were able to apply it, and they had an experience. That's why we call it the Financially Simple Experience. Today, we're talking through protecting your RIA, your Registered Investment Advisor's intellectual property for a higher multiple. Now, there's a lot in that title. We're pursuing this 8-figure exit. So many of us as business owners, we can experience an 8-figure exit. It is possible. Look, if an old boy from South Georgia is born and raised on a dirt road, if I can experience an 8-figure exit, friends, then anybody can. I'm telling you, anybody can do this. It's not easy. It's a lot of work. And what we're trying to do is give bite-sized pieces for you to consider and hopefully experience some things in your own business that will help you achieve your 8-figure exit. Intellectual property. We're going to dive into that today. But if you protect your intellectual property, you can increase the value of your company through a higher multiple. Now, in the past, we've talked about how value is created, and we give this simple example that says, let's say you have $100,000 in EBITDA or EBOC or EBIT or NOI or revenue, whatever your industry's measurement tool is for revenue, value, etc. There's $100,000 there. And if we have $100,000 and our multiple is 1, it means the $100,000 is multiplied by the multiple of 1, which means our company is valued at $100,000. If the multiple is 2, that means 100 times 2 is $200,000, and so forth, so on. So by increasing the multiple, we can increase the sell value, the value of our company, the intrinsic value of our company. Many times we as business owners want to go out, we want to increase more revenue. We say, hey, I want to grow from $100,000 to $200,000 of revenue, EBITDA, EBIT, whatever, and we forsake the multiple. We say, okay, we're currently have a $100,000 EBITDA and we have a multiple of 1, therefore our company's worth $100,000. We're going to go out and increase our value by increasing the EBITDA from $100,000 to $200,000. $200,000 times a multiple of 1 is $200,000. What if we reversed our thinking? What if we said, you know what, we have a EBITDA of 100,000, but let's increase our multiple. Let's increase our multiple by 2. We don't want to work harder. We want to work smarter. We want to build intrinsic value into the company. And as such, the multiple needs to increase. Friends, there's probably no better way than intellectual property to drive the value of your company through a higher multiple. As we were prepping for the show, I ran across the book, The Wealth of Knowledge by Thomas Stewart, and he defines intellectual capital. We're going to talk about intellectual property. Capital could be entertained there as a synonym. Thomas Stewart defines intellectual capital as knowledge assets, and he says, and I quote, "Simply put, knowledge assets are talents, skills, know-how, know-what, and relationships, and machines and networks that embody them. They can be used to create wealth." That is intellectual capital. If you've ever read Chris Snyder's book, Walking to Destiny, he defines IP, intellectual property, as structural capital. In his book, Walking to Destiny, he says, and I quote, "Structural capital is a business's infrastructure." So there is this value asset that's often recorded on the balance sheet that is sometimes undervalued on the balance sheet, but it's often recorded and it is well defined. We're going to call it intellectual property. Intellectual property. Today, we're going to talk about how protecting your intellectual property can increase your value. See, your company, no matter the company it's in, it has intellectual property, and it can be a powerful tool in the exit process. It can increase value. It can also increase tax planning strategies. There's a number of things you can do through intellectual property. However, when you lock down and you protect the intellectual property you have, you can boost the multiple that pushes you, accelerates you to the 8-figure exit. However, if you don't protect it, then it can become a liability. In fact, an update by the IP Commission Report estimates that the cost of IP theft to be in excess of $225 billion and could possibly be as high as $600 billion. So we have this asset. We have this thing called intellectual property, intellectual assets that can be protected. And when we don't, it can become a liability. It can harm our 8-figure exit, as the IP Commission Report illustrates. So what exactly is intellectual property? Investopedia has a really good definition on what intellectual property is, and I quote, "Intellectual property is a broad categorical description for a set of intangible assets owned and legally protected by a company or individual from outside use or implementation without consent." Let's tear that apart a little bit. It's a broad description. We got that. It's a set of intangible assets. In other words, you can't touch it. It's owned. In other words, the company or an individual owns it, and it's legally protected. There's your key. It is legally protected by the company from another company or another individual from using that information without consent. That is IP, or intellectual property. Now, there's a few very basic categories of intellectual property. You may recognize some of the names. For example, a patent. I love watching Shark Tank. It's one of my favorite shows to watch. I love watching the sharks analyze the deals really quick, and the questions they ask is very enlightening for somebody like me who is working with business owners and helping business owners, especially financial advisors, grow their value. So by watching Shark Tank, many times you can understand what an investor is thinking. So I love the show. I like the show. It's a lot of fun to me to watch. One of the things you often hear on there is they'll say, we have a patent pending. Somebody comes in to make a pitch to the sharks and they say, we have a patent pending. If you watch the sharks, they kind of let that roll off their back, like water off a duck's back, so to speak. However, whenever they have in hand, we have a patent and they have the document in hand, you'll watch the sharks, they sit up in their seat. They lean forward many times because they realize that the person making the pitch on their company for an investment or an acquisition, whatever it may be they're pitching, they understand the validity of IP protection. A patent is a pretty common term that is used. Basically, it allows an investor or an inventor exclusive rights to an invention. It could be a design, a process, improvement, a physical invention, like a machine, etc. It's granted by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So it's an intellectual property that has a piece of document that is issued by a government agency. That's a patent. Another protection piece is copyrights. Now, this is one that I personally have used. I have some patents myself, but I also use copyrights. What it does is it provides authors and creators of original material the exclusive right to use, copy, and duplicate their material, however, the original creators can grant anyone authority to use through a licensing agreement so they can use the work. So if I wanted to go out and talk about Moby Dick, the book, I don't have authority. I wasn't the creator of that novel. I did write the book, Your Baby's Ugly. I have the authority through copyrights and through patents to illustrate that, hey, it is mine. No one else can use my information and pass it off as if it's theirs. It's protected. Another IP that we could use is trademarks. Trademarks is a symbol, a phrase, an insignia, a logo, something that is recognizable and represents a product. Think about the swoosh, the swoosh. If you're thinking about swoosh, you might be thinking about the Nike swoosh. Perhaps the contoured bottle of Coca-Cola was a trademark back in 2002. It had a contoured body to it. It was a trademark. Maybe you look at the golden arches, as we used to call them growing up, the big M, it's a trademark of McDonald's. each of the trademarks can add value to your company by going through that process. Another one is trade secrets. Now, this is an under the radar one that we business owners really need to grasp the power of. Trade secrets. What makes your company tick? If your company is best in class, why is it best in class? More than likely, there are company processes and practices that are not public information, and they provide an economic benefit or an advantage to your company as the holder of those particular trade secrets. As such, you can protect it. Years ago, I had the opportunity to work with a realtor in the Charleston, South Carolina area, since this realtor is now passed. But back in the day, so some 20 some odd years ago, this realtor was producing realtor commissions almost 4x anybody else in that particular area, and almost 5x the entire realtor association of producers. I mean, this individual was just a stud. They knew how to make money. What they had done is they had built a system which allowed them to market the houses and produce a greater close rate. Because of the system, they could generate additional revenues and help their customers close their houses so much quicker if they were listing them back in the day. We were able to get that process protected and then place a value on that process, and then use the process not only for asset protection, but also for tax planning purposes with a good attorney and a very good CPA. So trade secrets, man, I got to tell you, friends, it's one that we business owners often don't understand the value of. Whenever you woke up this morning as a business owner, you had your day set. Now, obviously things could happen, as it does with all of us, but you had your day set. You had certain things in place which were going to allow you and your company and your team to operate hopefully efficiently and produce revenue that perhaps your competitors could not produce during that time period. I know whenever I was dealing with Financially Simple, we have a process. We have processes that are proprietary to us that allows me literally to spend about 40 minutes total of my time per each episode, recording it, doing a little bit of background check, make sure I understand the statistics, the research, record the detail, and then drop it. And then we have processes in place that take my audio recording, my video recording, and push it out to all the infrastructure of Financially Simple as trade secrets. Many people have asked me, Justin, how are you doing this? Man, you must be busy. You must be always in the podcast studio or in front of a camera. Not really. Not really. In fact, as I'm recording this today, by the way, for those of you on video, check out my G.I. Joe shirt. I had to wear this today because I mentioned G.I. Joe on the last episode. But I don't spend a lot of time doing this because we built processes and trade secrets which allow me to greatly magnify my time. Look, you don't have to start a blog or a podcast or create a patent in your business. We've been talking with financial advisors. You don't have to go out and create some sort of fancy, catchy logo or new software like some of our friends are doing in the industry. You don't have to do that. It may be that you have processes and procedures that drive your company's revenue to best in class, profitability to best in class, client retention to best in class. Whatever the measurement tool that you take pride in, it may be that your current processes, your trade secrets, as we're calling them, is your intellectual property. No matter what your intellectual property is, there is an importance. There is an importance that we can't overlook that IP has, intellectual property IP has in the business world. Businesses often invest in IP. Let me say it again. Businesses often invest in IP. You see, as an investor, many times it's more affordable for you to go out and buy something already built that has already kind of shaken out all the kinks and the problems and et cetera. It's sometimes easier to go out and purchase one than it is to create something from scratch. When you start going through like an MBA program and you understand the risk involved with creating a new process, a new product, et cetera, it becomes incumbent to a certain point where businesses would rather place their dollars on something that's already been created as opposed to something they have to create from scratch. Richard Thoman, who is the former CEO of Xerox, he made this statement, which I thought was very powerful. He said, "I'm convinced that the management of intellectual property is how value is going to be created at Xerox." Hear what he said. The management of intellectual property. He didn't say the creation of intellectual property. He said, "I'm convinced that the management of intellectual property is how value is going to be created at Xerox." Now, why didn't he say, I'm convinced that the creation of intellectual property is how valued. That's not what he said. He said the management. And he went on to say, and not just here either. Increasingly, companies that are good at managing IP will win. And those that aren't will lose. Richard Thoman was onto something. During his time as IBM CFO, he saw firsthand how intellectual property can increase revenue. During that time period, the intellectual property effort, the management of intellectual property that he oversaw, boosted annual patent licensing royalty by a phenomenal 3,300%. It moved it from 30 million in 1990 to 1 billion in 2000. That is pretty powerful, friends. Again, Richard was onto something. He said the management of intellectual property. For us as business owners, many times we've already created the value. We've been in business for a while. We know what works. Unfortunately, we know what works. What do I mean by that? We don't take the time to actually create the processes. We don't take the time to actually record what is working, to formalize it, to create something that has value, which can drive the intrinsic value of our company. We just simply have it in our head, or we do it by happenstance or out of habit. And we really don't dive into the secret sauce, so to speak. I'm always mesmerized by success stories of individuals later in life. And Colonel Sanders with Kentucky Fried Chicken with the unique blend of herbs and spices, right? The secret sauce took Colonel Sanders in the early age of 60 from nobody to a very successful business person because he realized that his secret ingredients was the intellectual property he needed. Now, friends, we can tell that story over and over and over again. IP matters, but unfortunately, very, very, very few business owners ever take the time to even present the IP, much less protect the IP. In the context of the 8-figure exit, if we can protect our IP, if we can protect those things which drive our company's intrinsic value, we can increase our firm's multiple, which will lead us to higher offers. But why? Why does it work this way? Julian Crump, who is the president of the International Federation of Intellectual Property Attorneys. Okay, big title, big international organization. Made the statement, over and above the underlying product or service it protects, IP is a valuable asset in its own right. Indeed, it can become, listen to this, a company's most valued asset. Let's bring it down to real life here. If we're talking to financial advisors, as we have been for some time period, more than likely, whenever you get to the valuation day, there's a methodology that's going to say these clients and this in your company is worth X. If you have a system or if you have processes that are proprietary to your company that can move the needle, can increase the margin of your company, can increase the growth rate of your company, can increase the retention rate of your company, if you have systems and processes that are best in class, that are highly desired by a buyer because perhaps their systems and processes aren't as good as yours, then you're liable to see the multiple increase. I personally experienced this. I experienced this as an exiting business owner because we had built IP. We had built processes and systems and lots of IP that whenever the various buyers saw it, they began pricing the IP, which drove the value of my company above perhaps those of my peers. See, IP can significantly increase your sales price. Let's go back to Julian Crump, who is the president of the International Federation of Intellectual Property Attorneys. They went on to say, IP rights create a protective wrapper around an intellectual asset, locking in value and making it tradable through licensing, pooling, securitizations, and acquisitions. So friends, there's an asset called IP that each of us have if we do our diligence and build the processes that we can protect. But how do you protect it? How do you protect it? Well, first you have to identify it, right? I mean, you can't just have it in your head. You got to get it on a paper where it can be analyzed and protected. It's got to be into a physical system. It's essential that you do this because without identifying the system, you can't create a value for it. In addition to trade secrets, copyrights, patents, and trademark, there are a few other ways that you can protect the IP that you have. For example, you can buy, if you wanted to, IP infringement coverage. You can buy an insurance policy, also known as intellectual property liability coverage. You can buy an insurance policy that protects the infringement claims against your particular product. Another one you can purchase is IP enforcement coverage. It's another type of insurance. It's there to indemnify the issued for legal expenses that they incur seeking to protect their IP against infringements. Let's go back to Coca-Cola. Let's just say hypothetically that years ago when Coca-Cola had their pretty nice curvy bottle, that Pepsi, their fierce competitor, came in and said, we're going to have our curvy bottle. It's going to look just like Coca-Cola, except red and white. It's going to have our blue logo and writing on it. What could have happened is that obviously Coca-Cola would go after Pepsi in this scenario with a vengeance to say, you can't do this. This is our intellectual property. This is our particular patented product. And any type of legal fees that would have incurred, IP enforcement coverage would have helped offset the expense. Now, as we mentioned last episode, as you go forward into the due diligence process in an acquisition or a merger, whatever of your business, there's going to be IP representations and warranties. You're going to have the representations and warranties there, and the coverage is going to defend against infringement and misappropriation of liability. Basically, it provides a reimbursement for defense or expenses in the event of a loss, award, or settlement, etc. So there's many types of insurances you can get to protect your IP. I want to summarize today's episode in this way. Intellectual property has value. It has value. If you've looked at your balance sheet, more than likely there's some sort of intellectual property. If nothing else, your website, which more than likely has some sort of a copywritten language at the bottom of your website in the footer. There's intellectual property in all of our companies. So we understand that there is value in intellectual property. We got that. Cool. If we take it a step further and systematize and figure out what is the secret sauce of our company and we outline it and we place it into a protective covenants, and it forces our company to be best in class in whatever measuring tool that you want to measure. I've mentioned a few. Maybe it's revenue, maybe it's margin, maybe it's customer acquisition cost, maybe it's customer retention, maybe it's profitability, maybe it's time on job. Whatever it is for your particular company, there's a secret sauce that allows you to produce that particular KPI. If you can identify it, then you can protect it. You can protect it in employment agreements, you can protect it with insurance, you can protect it with legal documents, and by protecting it, think about Shark Tank. Here you are now as the business owner that's going out saying, hey, I have this shiny business over here and I want to sell it. And by the way, I realize you're going to say my business is only worth X because you're industry standard, but you've got to look at what's causing this best in class result. It's my IP. And my IP is worth far greater than the average business. And here's why. Thus, that conversation, friends, drives your company value higher through an increased multiple. Your revenues don't have to change, but by having everything packaged so the appropriate buyer can come alongside and say, wow, that system they created over here, we really want it. Come on, we want that. We're willing to pay you a little bit more than above market value than what the financials are saying. We want to give you more because we want your system. We want that IP. We need it. It's easier for us to buy than it is for us to create it. We want to buy it and we want to manage it, like the CFO of Xerox said. So let me ask you, if I were to come in as a consultant in your particular business, by the way, you can hire us to do that. But if I were to come in as a consultant in your particular business and I said, hey, where's your IP? How would you answer it? If I were to say, let me see your process manual. Let me see your handbooks. Let me see your graphs. Let me see your visual flow charts on how your company operates. Could you produce it? Well, Justin, come on, man. I realize that we're financial advisors, or I realize put the name of the business there. Do we really need that? No, you don't. But do you want an 8-figure exit? That's what we're after, right? After all, we're trying to achieve the 8-figure exit. For us to have the 8-figure exit, friends, intellectual property has to become our friend. It has to be incorporated into our company so that we can drive our companies to that ultimate goal. Man, this is complicated. Reach out to us. We have a group of advisors that we'd be more happy to introduce you to. Till next time, friends. Hey, y'all go out and make it a great day. Let's work on this intellectual property together. Take care.